Most people, when they run for council, one of the things that they say they want to do is to create a better economic environment for their community, more jobs, more businesses, and whatever. So we're going to have today with us a gentleman who can really tell you all about that. And it's Jeff Hoagland. He is the president and CEO of the Dayton Development Coalition. I've known Jeff for more than 25 years. And, he's got a lot of experience in not only with that organization, but also working for cities. So he knows directly the challenges that your cities have to face, he worked at both Kettering and Vandalia. So we're very pleased that he was able to take his time out from his busy day to join us today, and also to take the challenge on meeting that 45-minute limit to impress upon you some of the important topics. So let's welcome Jeff Hoagland. Thank you, Jeff.
So I will get us back on track because I'll try to flip through this, but please at the same time stop me and ask questions. As Brian said, we've known each other for quite some time. I was fortunate to work under Steve Huseman at the city of Kettering for many years, and then worked there for about 10 years, and then was the city manager of Vandalia for 7 years. I've been with the Dayton Development Coalition now for a little over 7 years doing their economic development. So I was asked to give you kind of an overview of the economic development in the region, because even though our name says Dayton Development Coalition, I think a lot of people, especially outside the region, think we just focus on Dayton, and we're much larger than that. We're in 14 counties. So I will go through this. All this is in your books, so feel free to take notes. If you want a hard copy of this electronic copy of this, we can make that available. I think Brian and his team have it, so you're more than willing to pass that out. But one of our main themes going into 2018 is connect, innovate, and grow, and that's just probably not in economic development. It's in each of your communities as well. General Stephen Quast, who's one of the former fighter pilot, 3-star general in the Air Force. He spends a lot of time in Dayton, and he knows that we are truly, I think, the innovation capital of the world when it comes to the Air Force and the technologies that we have here. But I'll get into that. So from the DDC standpoint, we're trying to work with businesses. If it's a small business, big-sized businesses in your community, the Air Force base, if it's people trying to get contracts at the base. I'm not going to go walk through that process, but I'm going to walk you through some of the impacts that it has in each and every one of your communities. Our priorities from the Dayton Development Coalition is to attract companies into the region. If it happens to fall in Centerville, Mayor, or if it falls in Fort Loramie, at the end of the day, we really don't care. We just want to make sure it lands in our region, but then in the greater in the state of Ohio. And there's a lot of competition around us with Michigan, Indiana, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, West Virginia. But that's one part of it. It's the attraction. But most of our time is truly spent on business retention. About 80% from growth of a company comes from your local businesses in town. When I was at UD studying back in the late 80s and early 90s, my textbook said 80% of your growth comes from existing companies. And you'll see some of our stats that show about 79% of the DDCs of the Dayton region's job growth has come from existing companies since 2012, when we've really been tracking it in a different way. More focused on site development and making sure that sites in your communities are ready to go when companies come looking. The urban core in downtown Dayton is one of our region's priorities, because as a community goes, you're only as good as your urban core, and we do need to strengthen that urban core. It's coming around, and you'll see some of the statistics on that. And then entrepreneurial growth and support for Wright Patterson Air Force Base and the Springfield Air National Guard, because that's one that we believe is at risk if a new BRAC happens. So the connections that drive innovation, and I'm not going to go through all of these, but it does. It's from startups, it's from university partners, it's local economic development groups, it's cities, counties, townships. They're all part of this ecosystem that is helping drive the Dayton region. Just some stats that we like to show. The Dayton region, we're the middle line, we're kind of the dark blue. So we are surpassing the Ohio average. We're still a little bit below the national average, but Ohio has been doing much better. Some of the companies that we've worked with over the last few years that have been some big drivers, Fuyao Glass in Moraine, Procter & Gamble, which is up by the airport in Union, Tenneco is in Kettering, Silfex in Springfield. I mean, we're just seeing growth all over the region. But as long as our trends are going the right way, which we think they are, when you look at the companies and the work that we're doing together, because it is truly a partnership, a lot of people ask, how is this helping? What's it mean to us? And at the end of the day, sometimes we have companies, or mostly companies, that once we work with them, they move on and they're on to the next. But our philosophy is more, at the end of the day, we're in it for the greater good. And if someone wants to work with us on a project and then they move on afterwards, we're staying here for the long run, because it's up to the communities, your economic development directors, your city managers, whoever it might be, to try to get the defense installation stronger, which drives people to buying houses in your communities, groceries, the amenities. If it's bringing in a company like Fuyao, there's going to be supply chain that comes from that. So we're going to have spin-off companies. We have a team, I'm not going, but next week we have a group going to China. Fuyao has set up meetings with us, with a lot of their supply chain suppliers that they think should be doing business with them in this region. So we're proactively trying to get out there and get these businesses, which really builds the relationships, helps the companies, helps your communities. Some of the, the four major initiatives of our organization. We're about 25 years old as an organization. We were a spin out of the Dayton Chamber years ago by the private business community, and it was to focus just on economic development. All the chambers in our region, in the state, they have great missions. A lot of it is focused on member benefits, if it's healthcare, if it's back in the day workers' comp and other things, but there's a key role for them. But back in the day, the business community said, we want a group that just focuses on economic development and can support Wright Patterson Air Force Base. So we have a group, and I'll go into a little bit of detail on each of them. We have a group that does the Jobs Ohio. So under Governor Kasich, when he came in 7 years ago, he privatized economic development. It used to be done under the Ohio Department of Development. And as my previous speaker talked about, sunshine laws, which actually is, to me, that's a fascinating topic. And as some of you were questioning, is it a public meeting? Isn't 3 versus 4 versus 2? I'm with most of you, but I'm not an attorney. So, but I find that topic very fascinating, and it is an all-day topic. So if you have the opportunity to go through those, do it. We used to always put our employees through it, and that's one area that can really trip you up. But Governor Kasich privatized economic development in a way to work closer with business, faster with business, but also to keep it more private for the businesses. So everything isn't a public record. And our organization is set up very similarly to Jobs Ohio. In my opinion, you'll see some of the stats, it's working very well. I think regardless of who our next governor is, if it's a Democrat or a Republican, Jobs Ohio will stay in place. It's funded very well, but it's become, I think, very effective. We have a small startup accelerant. We have a small startup fund for more high-tech companies. We're probably about 2/3 of the way through it. It was a $9 million fund to work with high-tech startup companies in the region, and then hopefully to keep them here. I talked a little bit about Wright Pat, Springfield Air National Guard, and the VA. We spend a lot of time on kind of the federal side of things. A lot of people know Dayton as feds, eds, and meds. Those are all kind of drivers in our region. And then the advocacy side of things. We have a strong presence in Washington, D.C. A gentleman works for us. He's been with us for about 17 years, lives in D.C., works there just for us, just for this region. That does a lot of policy and focuses mostly on Wright Pat, but some other areas as well. So let's drill down into some of those a little bit. So nationally recognized for growth, there's a Site Selector magazine that comes out every year that ranks economic development in each state and then in each region. And believe it or not, the Dayton MSA has done extremely well. For 11 consecutive years, the Dayton MSA has been in the top 10, and that's consecutive years. But the Dayton MSA only takes into account Greene County, Montgomery County, and Miami County. It doesn't take into account Greene County, which is a part of our metro market, Warren County, which is a part of our metro market, Clark County, which is a part of our metro market. So when you add all that together, we're doing even better than I think some of the recognitions show. The Association of Defense Communities, it's a national group. We do a lot with them. Wright Pat and the Dayton community, we are usually the model that they point to of how you do work with a military base. From the standpoint of statistics and jobs, I like to show this chart because when Jobs Ohio started, there were a lot of unknowns, a lot of questions. So we try to show everything that's out there, and these are, once again, these are jobs committed. So when the companies sign agreements, this is what they're saying. We are following up, and Jobs Ohio and the state, they do that as well. There's agreements that companies sign, and so they're held to these agreements. If they don't meet their requirements, there's clawbacks that are put into place that require the companies to pay back X, Y, or Z. The majority of the companies hit it. They really do. A lot of them, like Fuyao, they were committed to 1,550 jobs. They're right now, and that's less than 4 years ago, they're at 2,300 jobs. So most of these companies, they know, they try to be on the conservative side, but the majority of them do hit their mark. So you can see the jobs committed. When you look at 17 was an interesting year from a jobs committed standpoint, probably one of our lowest number of jobs committed. Now, the previous year was one of our highest years, so there's some that hit in December, some that hit in January that throw it off. I usually don't get too concerned about the specific jobs, but the part that I really was impressed with in 17 was the capital investment. So we had one of our lowest number of jobs in our region since 2012, but we had our highest capital investment ever, almost $1 billion. But the part to me that's best is the payroll and the average salary per job. So we track this. You can see in 2012, where we were 40,000, slowly rising. But in 2017, we went up by almost $10,000, up to about $54,000 per job. So what that tells us is they're higher quality jobs. They're starting to pay a little bit more. This is for just economic development in general. Dr. Richard Stock at UD, he was doing a presentation at the Dayton Business Journal this year, and he mentioned this topic. It wasn't this chart, but he mentioned this, and we went back and grabbed the data. And between 16 and 17, all jobs in the Dayton region compared to the rest of the state, we were superior. We outgrew every city in the state of Ohio. Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati. You can see some cities actually went backwards a little bit. And when you look at the types of jobs and the average salary of jobs, everything's starting to fall into place for us. From a standpoint of regional wins from 2012 to the present, you can see we're all over our metro market. 70 and 75 obviously is a key driver for us. That's where a lot of companies want to be. But we're in every part of the region with companies, and I won't go through all of them, but you can see some of the main ones that are on the slides. And then kind of moving forward, what areas are we focusing on? The growth areas that we see continue to be manufacturing and advanced manufacturing, the bioscience world, not just healthcare, not our hospitals, but the bioscience medical device companies, a lot of startups in the bio world. We're seeing a lot of growth there. The aviation and aerospace, that continues to be, a strong growth area. But when you look at cyber, that's going to continue to be a strong area, especially with our universities. We have a partnership with the Cincinnati area and the Dayton area, and our universities and industry doing a lot together. Question?
Yeah, in the cyber area, that looks like that's primarily like Wright Pat. Do we have much of that in industry?
Yeah, so that's kind of what I was alluding to. Between Cincinnati and Dayton, we have a kind of a formal agreement. UC and UD are partners in that, but we have all kinds of industry that's in that corridor, that cyber corridor that they meet quarterly. So a lot of that is happening. It's the banks, it's LexisNexis, it's Teradata, it's all of those companies you would think that are looking at this, and that's probably the most critical issue when it comes to, if it's, we all have iPhones, our banking, we can bank on here, we can do everything on here. Protecting that is key. Wright Pat's a different component. Most of their work is classified, so that's a whole nother component, but they have people and assets that we can tap into. The autonomous systems, we're going to continue to see growth in UAVs. The headquarters for that is here at Wright Pat, but that has flipped outside the fence into the industry along 675, 75. Springfield, we see a lot of growth out there in the UAV industry as well from private industry. So Wright Pat is a driver, but what we've seen is the way it flips outside the fence into our normal private industry. This last slide, workforce. That's one of the biggest topics that we hear every single day. I was with a company this morning from Illinois, and the gentleman, before we set up the meeting, he said, I'm going to be in town meeting with Emerson. I don't want to talk land. I don't want to talk incentives. We need to talk workforce first, because if we can't get the workforce, there's no reason to talk land. There's no reason to talk incentives. And he's spot on, and that's That's the issue with every business in your communities, with the base, with every group that we're working with. And if it's the opioid problem, if it's people showing up for work, if it's just an undereducated workforce, I mean, it's not just Dayton, it's the entire state, it's the country, and whoever figures that out first, I think will be the big winner in this whole thing. But our university system is very critical. On the bottom here, welding courses. It's important for the universities and the community colleges to have the students going through their programs, but it's also incumbent upon the businesses to tell them exactly what they need, because one of the complaints we get is when students come out of school, the companies will say, well, now we have to put 6 more months into them. Well, can't blame the schools for that if they're not being told exactly what they need. So, when you get into the vocational schools, when you get into the community colleges, they can tailor some of their companies a little bit quicker. If it's nursing, if it's welders, if it's like Fuyao Glass, Sinclair Community College went in there and they, put programs together that trained these people very quickly, gave them the certificates they needed, and then they had the qualified people. We are moving forward significantly. A lot of research and development and manufacturing and the other topics that I talked about. You look over by UD, which once was NCR. That's turned into a true asset. GE Aviation built a $55 million R&D center there. Emerson built about a $40 million R&D center there. The fairgrounds is now owned by Premier and the university. That's going to be a top-notch, I think, high-quality development in kind of all these areas. It's going to be small business, large business, some related to the base. So we've got a lot going on. And I'd mentioned this, some of the new names from old places. The old GM is now Fuyao. The old NCR is now home to Midmark, GE, Emerson, and many more. You look outside the region, Navistar, Taupe Ray, McCook Field, and there's a company called G3 Global Graphene. They're just doing state-of-the-art technology there and growing from a manufacturing standpoint. So we continue to rebuild. When you look at some of our big companies that have been here for a while up north, surprised at tremendous amount of growth up north. Airstream every year for 4 straight years, they've announced about 300 to 400 new employees, another expansion. Henny Penny, Airstream, Whirlpool, Honda, PSA. A lot of people may not know this, but PSA, we at Dayton had the Dayton International Airport. The PSA is headquartered there. They fall right under American Airlines. They have about 9 affiliates. American does. PSA is one of them. It's headquartered here in Dayton, Ohio. That's the only airline headquarters in the state of Ohio, and it's here in Dayton, Ohio. And most people don't know that. So we work very closely with them. They continue to hire a lot of people, especially on the mechanic side, and they're working with Sinclair. But then, breaking new ground, Procter & Gamble, Spectrum Brands out by Dayton Airport. There's a company in Inglewood that opened that's hematite at the bottom. There was a groundbreaking this past summer for them. Canadian company, they've got a lot of business in St. Louis as well. They love this Dayton region's location. They found some land, and we see a lot more growth from Canadian companies coming into our region. And then just some more of the regional successes. Taupe Ray America in Springfield. And Springfield's in a sweet spot because they're halfway between Dayton and Columbus. They can grab from both workforces, just like I think southern Montgomery County is in a sweet spot. You got Cincinnati south, and then you've got Dayton north. So that's where the Austin Landing is growing. Springboro is growing. Westchester continues to grow. So once again, because of the workforce, you can grab more markets from that. So Springfield is an area that we've seen a lot of growth from. Verso Corporation, this is an interesting one because when the bankruptcy happened and when companies were merging, Verso, their corporate headquarters were in Memphis, Tennessee, but the major amount of employees were here in Dayton. But we were able to convince them. They came here several times, and they've relocated their leadership team here. They're hiring people here. Large payroll. Not a huge capital investment because they were in a newer facility, but that was a big win to get the corporate side of things here. Emerson up in Sydney, Ohio. This is one that to me is one that goes back to the job growth. We didn't have a huge number in 2017, but Emerson invested $100 million. They're investing right now as we speak $100 million in their Sydney facility with no new jobs. I will take those all day long because I know those companies are staying for the long term here. And Emerson, the supply chain they work with in a lot of the communities, just that ripple effect is huge. So having companies like that, switching over to Wright Pat a little bit, you can see in 2006 where Wright Pat was, the 05 BRAC really changed Wright Patterson, I think, in this region for the good. As the economy was crashing in 2008, 9, and 10, you can see Wright Pat was actually going the completely opposite way. $300 million in construction at the base. We brought missions in from Arizona and from San Antonio, and now we're at over 27,000 employees at the base. The annual economic impact, when you count just the Dayton MSA, so once again, Montgomery County, Greene County, and Miami County, the economic impact is about $4 billion a year, which is an awesome number. But when you go out into Clark County, Warren County, the true Dayton metro market, that economic impact is about a $10 to $12 billion annual economic impact into all of your communities. People buying houses, going to your schools, going to the groceries, hopefully buying cars, all of that, and the wages are outstanding. Some of the growth that we've seen, so at the Air Force Research Laboratory, the headquarters is here. They spend about $4.5 billion a year at the Air Force Research Laboratory alone. And in Dayton, they spend about $2.5 billion of that. And a lot of business is coming out. What we've been trying to do is work with the Air Force to work with more companies locally to get some of those contracts. And what we've been seeing since 2013 is a steady progression upward in the tick. So you can see in 2017, there was a $90 million increase in contracts out of the Air Force Research Laboratory. We've had a 75% growth in 17 over the average of 13 to 16, which was higher. And kind of, when I drill down into that, in the country, the spend was $11.56 billion. $2.39 billion was in Ohio, but when I hit this, of that $2.39 billion, $1.9 billion was spent in the greater Dayton area. So we're capturing a huge percentage of that. And when you see this chart, for every 1% of growth of Air Force contracts that we see, that equates to about $25 million in new contracts. And of that $25 million in new contracts, it's about 200 new jobs. But you can't see those. They're not in the newspaper. A company might hire 5 here, 7 here, 12 here, 22 here, but they're all adding up. And we've seen that growth since 2013 through 2017, and those numbers continue to trend up. So we're seeing significant growth. And once again, these are high-income types of jobs. I think jobs that all of you would love to have in your community, or those people, because they're not taxed at the base, those people who don't live in a township, driving back to your communities and paying the income tax when they come in. So I mentioned a little bit Accelerator Fund 1. So we have, as I said, a $9 million fund. We have about $6 million of that committed now in high-tech startup companies. And once again, a lot of these we're seeing in the bio industry, in the bio world. Some are still coming out of the Air Force Research Laboratory, most of them from a technology standpoint. But just some examples. This is a company, Nano Spurs, from one of our previous funds. We invested in them. They did really well. Now they're actually growing, and it may not seem like a lot, but they created 6 jobs. They retained 6 more jobs. But we're seeing these small companies, 5, 6, 7, 8, lots more of them than we have in the past, and that's where a lot of the growth is going to come from. At the base, NSAC is the National Air and Space Intelligence Center, about 3,300 employees. And I don't know about you all, but if you had a company with 3,300 employees, you'd probably be spending a lot of time with them. I know I would be. And that's one reason we spend so much time at the base. No, we're always trying to hold on to NSAC. There's other states that would like to do and take that away, Alabama being one of them. But with our congressional delegation, they've been able to hold on to it, but they've been able to grow it. There was an announcement a few weeks ago that they're going to get another facility. They just opened one last summer. We're going to get another one. It's about $116 million. And they do all the foreign military exploitation. So what are the Russians doing? What are the Chinese doing? What are the North Koreans doing from a standpoint of if it's a plane that we happen to capture, that plane will actually come here. They will dissect that and figure out how they're doing, how they're working against our F-35 or our F-22. But then NSAC takes that over to the Air Force Research Laboratories, and then they do kind of the counterintelligence and then research and development on that. So all that takes place here in Dayton, Ohio. And this topic is probably a one-day topic as well, but I won't go down that path, as I know we have a limited amount of time. Another thing that we do as a community, because of the importance of Wright Pat, is we have a Hometown Heroes program where we have worked with the Dayton Dragons. For you basketball fans, there's a little thing right now going on called the First Four that our organization is very involved with. But we do things with the Victoria Theater, Dayton Art Institute, the new Levitt Pavilion, which is under construction downtown. They've reached out to us. They want to do a Wright Pat night. And really what it is, it's them giving tickets to the airmen and their families, thanking them for everything they do for our region. And it's been a huge success with the First Four in the NCAA here in town since 2012. through sponsorship of mostly private private companies, but we have a lot of municipalities and counties involved. This region has donated, after these games, it'll be close to 40,000 tickets to airmen, their families, and underprivileged children in the region. And it really does help. When Dayton's being talked about for 2 straight nights on national television, it helps our profile. And right now, we actually have 6 site selectors in town. We're showing them sites, talking to them about Dayton, and then tonight they'll take them to the game. And we don't have the Browns, the Reds, the Indians, Ohio State Buckeyes, so we can't court companies or site selectors with that, but we have the NCAA, and they come back every year. And it's not just the same people, it's new people coming who have been hearing about it. So it's just some of the things that we're trying to do. And as we move forward, this is kind of just wrapping up and just reiterating the whole connections, the innovation, the growth, working with the base, working with private industry, but also working with the public sector, because you guys truly are partners. You have a lot of the relationships with businesses that we don't. I know firsthand when I was in Kettering and in Vandalia. So, I push my team a lot to make sure that we're communicating, hand in hand with our partners. And I think it's going in the right direction. It's not perfect, but it's getting us, I think, where we need to be. And then, how can we help? We know most of your economic development people, but if you're not getting the attention you think you need, let us know. That's the only way we can find out. There's lots of opportunities for that interaction. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, we go to Washington, D.C. once a year. The community has been doing it for over 30 years. We call it our fly-in, where we go and meet with Senator Brown and Portman and Congressman Turner and Davidson and a few others to give them the region's priorities. It's a day-and-a-half trip where we go and give the region's priorities. We have become, and I say we as the community, the region, nationally recognized. Senator Brown and Portman say it all the time. They tell Cincinnati and Cleveland, Columbus, and other places that Dayton does it the best. We usually send about 120 people. We have great representation from the public sector that goes, and this information's up on our webpage. If any of you are interested in going, feel free to go. And when you're out on the front lines, specifically when it's economic development, there's a rhythm that we have to get in. If we get out ahead of a project, or if a city or a county announces a project before the business is ready, or before the state or Jobs Ohio has approved things, it could jeopardize that project. And so we use a lot of contingency language that says, contingent upon local and state and other approvals, but we've been caught in a bind several times where people have gotten out ahead of it, and I get it. There's a lot to be said about getting publicity for a project, for a company, for your community, but we just have to be very careful with the timing of that, because if it's announced and if the company then says, yes, we're coming, the state or Jobs Ohio could say, well, at the end of the day, I guess you don't need our incentives if you've already announced it. So I just kind of a word of caution. Your ED staffs know it, your city managers know it, but that is something that's important to us. We have a strong relationship with the media. We try to keep them informed. We try to be as open and transparent as we can, but also we march to the tune of the business. If the business says they're not ready to announce or they're not ready to go, we hold that very sacred, because it's their decision, and we don't want to upset that company, because there could be other opportunities in the future for other growth, and we want them to have the best positive experience as possible. The freedom of information discussion that you had before us, that's critical in everything we do, and I tell our staff all the time when we're working on projects. We have a lot of code names for projects, but it's very easy for the media to find out the project name. So as soon as they hear the project name, they'll start contacting. If it's Centerville, if it's Dark County, they will find that, and they'll ask all that information, and they have to give it to them. So I tell my staff, try not to put anything in writing. Don't put emails, don't hit send, because one email over here gets one back here, and then next thing you know, there's 10 emails, and everything's out there. And once again, coming from the public sector and working so closely in Kettering and Vandalia for so many years, I know how tricky it can be, and I always try to have that mindset when we're dealing with projects to make sure that we're trying to be as private for the business as possible, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that want the privacy, and that's what I keep trying to tell our team. But overall, it works. It's been working extremely well. We're seeing continued growth in the region, and in the next couple of years, we expect We expect to see, the stock market, I think, go down, but nothing like 8, 9, or 10. But looking into the future, our pipeline is very strong in the region. Our first quarter of 2018 has probably been one of the strongest so far. So things are looking up in the Dayton region. So I think I got us close to back on time a little bit. I have a few minutes for questions if anybody has any questions for me. Yes, sir.
The upwards of $1 billion investment in infrastructure or capital investment, to what could that be attributed?
So this is what anecdotally, but also hearing a little bit from the company. So the first half, so President Trump, when he was elected, things slowed down significantly. The first half of 17 was probably, the first quarter for sure, was probably the slowest I've ever seen it. Second quarter started to pick up a little bit, but then I think people finally realized we got to get on with our lives, with our businesses, with the country, regardless of what he's tweeting or saying or doing. But I think it was some pent-up demand. They've kind of been waiting to see what was going to happen, and then finally they realized, okay, we've been holding back on some investments, and it was just time to go. And I think also the national economy is doing better. But companies like Emerson, they've been waiting, and then for them to make a $100 million announcement. But $100 million announcement, we had two other companies. One company, had almost a $300 million expansion. So I'll take that $100 million all day, but then 2 months later, one comes out $300 million. So some of it's timing, but also the growth is there. These companies are truly growing. So that's this year we expect it to be between $500 and $600 million. I don't expect another close to $1 billion capital investment year, but and that's why I like to average things out, just because some years will be high, some will be low, and you just got to find out where that consistency is. Yeah, excellent question.
Old versus new. I am a graduate of Patterson Co-op High School.
Oh, okay, yes.
I'm interested in CareSource.
Yes.
So, but all of their investment will be for 18, I presume?
So the investment from CareSource was counted in 17 when it was, good question. So when we count jobs and capital investment, it's when the announcement takes place, because that's when the agreements are signed. So a lot of times we'll have a lot of announcements, and the following year we'll have a lot of ribbon cuttings, which is a good thing for most people. But yes, I look out, that's my view every single day, and I'm seeing that beautiful building go up, and CareSource has been a great community partner and a great economic development driver for this region and actually multiple states. Yeah. Yes?
I know that BRAC has been out there forever. When do you foresee, based on what you've heard, that we might face another BRAC?
Yes. So you obviously know a lot about the military, it seems like, so thank you. Retired, awesome. Well, thank you for working out there and serving that niche. So BRAC, base realignment and closure. For those of you who don't know, the last one that happened there were several, but 95, when I was in Kettering, is when the old DESI facility was closed. In 2005, another BRAC took place nationally, and that's consolidating locations. Our guess is we really thought one was possible for 19. And they usually do them right after elections. If there's going to be one, it might be 2021. But that's, once again, that's looking at trends. But with Congress, so much has changed. Everything is unpredictable, especially with and I'm not saying politics. Our current president, he's unpredictable. So we just don't know. So sometimes you can look at trends all day long, and it may not matter. But we're really looking at 2021 as that potential date. And honestly, we hope one happens. We think Wright Pat is poised to be a gainer. I do worry about Springfield, National Guard Base. Toledo has one, Mansfield has one, Youngstown has one, Columbus has a branch. I think some would say that, Wright Pat, they're fine. Do we need Springfield? So we're spending a lot of time with Springfield, and NSAC does a lot of work out at Springfield as well, which is directly tied to Wright Pat. So we're trying to strengthen that up as well. Yes. So there's a lot of unmanned air vehicle beyond line of sight work taking place out in Springfield, some of the newest technology in the United States, and it's in Springfield, Ohio. So it's a great story out there. Yeah, thank you. All righty, well, I appreciate your time. Thank you for, honestly, and I mean this, for serving your communities. It's, I've never been on the elected side. I've been on the administrative side, but I know what you all go through. I live in Vandalia still, and I give my council members, who I know really well, give them a hard time and fun. But the work you guys do, it can be grueling and grinding, and sometimes people don't appreciate the amount of time that you all put into it. So thanks for your service and your time to that. And I know they're not high-paying jobs by any stretch of the imagination, but we need people like you to make our communities greater. So thank you for putting your time into it to make your communities better, but more importantly, the greater Dayton region, such a strong community that it is. Yeah, awesome. Brian, thanks for having me again.
Thank you, Jeff. And just want to emphasize one point he made. As a city manager, I had a saying that loose lips sink ships. I can tell you firsthand experience that a council member that we took on to provide some local flavor for a site visit was going, and he took part in that. Site visit went very well. We thought we had it landed, and unfortunately, this council member thought it was time to make an announcement well before anything was signed, and we lost the project. So if your city manager is a little hesitant, it could be from past experience. I'm sure they'll be glad to share with you some information, but if they get it more general rather than specific, don't blame them, because a lot of times that is what the company asked for. So he or she is not trying to hide anything specifically from you. They're just trying to make sure that that project comes through.